Hello guys, and welcome to episode 48 of the Beat Your Backlog Podcast, a podcast discussing the things gamers like to put off, get to another day, and oh yes, will definitely beat later, their backlog. I'm your host Adam, and today we are diving into the bright and colourful world of Temtem Swarm. And if you're not familiar with Temtem, it is a creature collection game created by Kremer and was released back in 2022. And I didn't realise how many C's were in that sentence until I just read it out loud now. And the original game Temtem made some waves because it was really like the first Pokemon Light that was released on PlayStation and Xbox. Now, in the last couple of years, there's been like a wave of these sort of Pokemon creature, catcher, tamer games that have hit lots of other consoles. But I really remember that Temtem was the first really major one that released. So it kind of, made a big name for itself back then because of that. And what was also cool about that original game is that it had an online multiplayer component where you could see and interact with other Tem trainers in your world. So if you're a veteran Pokemon fan and you ever played the old the old school Pokemon MMO fan game, it was basically that game where you could see other people walking around in the world and you could go up and just ask them to trade or challenge them to fights. That's what Temtem was, but with much nicer graphics, a cool story, and completely original monsters or Tems. And yeah, I'm a really big fan of Temtem. I even backed the original game back on Kickstarter in 2018, I think, and received a Pig Epic plushie for doing so, which I no longer have, unfortunately. But because of this kind of lineage and this history I had with Kremer, when they announced that they were making a Temtem Survivor-like game, so like a Vampire Survivor-like, I don't know if it's actually a term or it's just a term I use, but this is what I call these kinds of games. So these games that are very heavily inspired by the game Vampire Survivors. And as soon as I heard that they were making a Temtem version, I thought this is a great idea. So I added the game to the wish list on my Steam as fast as I could. And Temtem Swarm actually released in early access on Steam on November 13th, 2024. And it seems to be a success with fans. It currently has a very positive review on Steam with 991 reviews, but does not have a score on Metacritic because it's still in early access. That's why I imagine it's not got a score. The reasoning for the early access release, according to the game's Steam page, is as follows. We're bringing Temtem Swarm into early access so that we can work with our amazing community to help shape the game's future by gathering your invaluable feedback and suggestions. We've already got plans for what we want 1.0 to look like, and we'll be adding content throughout the early access. But we're sure we'll learn along the way and discover new and exciting features to add too. Yeah, I think early access is a good way to go with these games. I think it's very much like this genre is becoming a trend. They're not the first company to make games that are maybe like they already have a pre-existing IP and they make like a spin-off, a Survivors like spin-off of it. If you know Deep Rock Galactic, they did at the start of the year actually a game called Deep Rock Galactic Survivors, so it's even a bit more on the nose than Temtem Swarm is, which was also really, really good. I actually played it quite a lot, but I never got around to reviewing it for some reason. It's also a good game, and it's also in early access, and they're kind of adding content to it pretty regularly, so that game is still going strong. And yeah, we'll see how Temtem Swarm's early access goes. But I guess what you guys want to know is how was the early access launch, and if you're a fan of creature collection games or survivor-like games, should you check it out? So let's find out in this week's episode of the Beat Your Backlog podcast. But as always, guys, before we get into it, I would like to remind you that if you are enjoying the podcast so far, please leave us 5-star reviews on whichever service you're listening to and subscribe. Thanks so much. Let's get into it. So interestingly, the devs behind Temtem Swarm describe it as a bullet heaven game rather than a bullet hell, and I can completely agree with it. So the game takes a tried and true formula of Vampire Survivors and has you controlling one of its cute Tem characters as waves and waves of Tem enemies spawn and try to attack you. And I think the premise behind the idea of the game is that in Temtem, all of the creatures are sort of digital creatures that live inside these cards. So it's kind of a bit like a Digimon, I suppose. And this Temtem Swarm is like these Pokemon, I'm going to do that a lot in this episode, one of the Tems inside its card training to become stronger. I think that's kind of the premise, which is quite cool. And how it works is your Tem will automatically use its own attack, which is based on a time-based cooldown. When your Tem attacks and kills an enemy, the enemy will drop XP, which you can hoover up and use to level up. Every time your Tem levels up, you can choose a new attack or skill, and in total you can choose between 4 different attacks, or in total you can have 4 different attacks, but there's lots and lots of different ones to choose from, each of which can be leveled up. So it could be that you choose the attack, and then if you keep choosing it, it will keep getting stronger and stronger until eventually you max out the level. And at the start of the game, so before you kind of level up your Tems, you also have 4 different passive skills that you can choose from too. The loop of the game is the more you level up and the more you get stronger, the more damage you can do and enemies you can kill, leading to you gaining more XP to then level up with. And the survivor as a genre, I think, is quickly becoming one of my favorite genres. I find it both kind of really exciting to play because of the input from the player, because it's quite minimal. Anyone can play it. All you usually do is move around with the WASD keys or the arrow keys, and in this game you do have to use the space bar because there is a timed move, like an ultimate move you can use on space. And I just really find these games very relaxing and also kind of very exciting, because I think I said it if you've not listened to it already, I already did a review of Vampire Survivors. It was actually the first episode I ever did on the podcast. But Vampire Survivors was designed by someone who had worked in the slot game industry, and I work in the slot game industry, and I think it's very interesting how a lot of the gambling sort of psychology has been used in Vampire Survivors, and also then because this is a copy of not a clone, but it's inspired by Vampire Survivors, a lot of that stuff has kind of transitioned over to Temtem Swarm 2, which I think is really interesting. And I just really like the feeling of how quickly you can get strong in the game, and that you just get this dopamine from collecting lots and lots of XP. You can see it all over the floor. It's very satisfying to pick up. The leveling up feels very satisfying too, that you kind of get a choice, and then, okay, if I get a choice of 4 different attacks, which one I should go for. Also, they like in Vampire Survivors, they have a very sort of satisfying loot box opening animation in here. So you land these box and it kind of shakes and then bursts open, and you see what you get. So I just really like these games. I think they're just great, and great to play. For me, they're a great game to just chill out to before bed. I think it's mostly because the input is quite minimal. You can just play them, enjoy them. If you die, if they're good, you kind of all right, I just want to go again straight away. And that's why I really, really like this genre. And I think it's also why I guess the developers have called this a bullet heaven, because, bullet hells, you want to try and dodge the enemies and get out of the way. But in this game, or in these types of games, you definitely want as many enemies as possible, because you want to be able to wipe out as many as possible and get as much XP as you can by defeating them. However, XP isn't the only item you get from enemies in this game, so you also get these things called pansuns, and pansuns act like the currency these games are, like the roguelite, so you die and then the run ends and then you start the run from the very beginning. But this is sort of like the thing that you carry over from run to run. They're called pansuns, and I don't know if they're what they are in the original game. I don't know if it's a currency or it's some type of special item in Temtem, but yeah, they're the currency that carries over, and you can use these pansuns to upgrade your Tems for the next run, but we'll get into that a little bit more later. So yeah, so I kind of explained what a Survivors-like game is, I suppose, but what does Temtem Swarm do differently than other Survivor-like games? And it's a great question, because I think, like I said, a lot of these games just try to take as much from Vampire Survivors as possible and then add a small twist on it. And I would say that's exactly what Temtem Swarm has done as well. I would say 75% of the game is the same as other Survivor like Vampire Survivors and Deep Rock Galactic Survivors. So if you've played those games, you will recognize most of it in Temtem Swarm. However, it does switch with the genre in some interesting ways that make the game feel fresh and new. And firstly, the fact that you play as Tems, which can evolve, is a really cool idea. Like I said, I think this idea of matching sort of Temtems or Pokemon that basically start off really weak and then can grow really, really strong is a great idea. And in the early access, there are 7 different Tems you can play as, but first you have to unlock them. And the way that you do this is that you defeat a boss on a map. You're given an egg as a reward, and then when you go into the next game, you basically have to complete one of the first. I think it's an event that happens at 3 minutes in the game. that then will hatch the egg for you. So it's kind of cool because it's like it's a fun way to unlock these creatures. It's not like in a lot of the other games where you just basically buy them and can unlock them. It feels quite satisfying to do that, and also the egg kind of is a little bit of a surprise which Tem you're gonna get. I mean, you can kind of almost tell from the outside of the egg because the eggs are themed to the type of the Tem inside. But I did really like this idea, and it also plays into the kind of Pokemon creature collection Temtem theme of the game, which is cool. And when you evolve Tems, it does give them a stat boost. So if you're playing in the game, you, like I said, you start off on like the basic kind of level 5 or level 1 Temtem, and then at different levels you can evolve them. And this does make them stronger. But actually, in my opinion, I don't think evolving them has that much effect on gameplay. But what I like is it does give you the choice of when you want to evolve them. So, for example, I played with a lot with a Tem called Platypet, which evolves at level 20. But when he gets to level 20, you can actually decide if you want to evolve him or if you want to take a new skill. So it has like this kind of nice risk and reward where maybe when you very first start playing the game, or if you're very new to these genres, you'll always upgrade him because it gives him a stat boost. But the more you play it, the more you realize, well, actually, it might be better to take more and more skills sooner than evolving him. So not wasting one level on evolution, but take more skills, because you might be able to create synergies with those skills or those attacks, which means you'll do more and more damage, which means you'll get more and more XP, which means you'll keep leveling up faster. And I'm not sure if this is actually the case, but in Pokemon, and I'm not sure about Tem, but I know in Pokemon, like if you don't level up the Pokemon or don't evolve the Pokemon when it can evolve, that Pokemon grows quicker, like it gets more XP and can learn moves faster. So it kind of felt like that would have been cool in this game too, that if you don't upgrade him, you will level up faster and faster, so you'll be able to get more and more skills. But it's kind of risky because you don't get the extra health, you don't get the extra base stats you get from evolving. So I really like that kind of mechanic. And it can also be that, yeah, if you don't evolve him, you might get into a little bit of trouble later, and then you can evolve him if you're struggling, and then it might help you out then. So I really like that kind of risk and reward mechanic there. And then after you've battled it out, you can spend your hard-earned Pansons on permanent upgrades for your Tems. So this includes things like increased speed, increased health, attack, critical attack, and XP gain. And the further you progress into the game, you can also spend Pans to unlock a dodge roll and an extra skill slots in battle, which is also very cool. So that like some Tems actually start off with dodge rolls as part of their skill set. But yeah, the further you progress down the kind of so each Tem has like a skill tree, and they're all kind of individual too. So it might be that for one Tem, the first thing you could upgrade is its critical attack, but another Tem, it might be that you have to upgrade its special attack and then its regular attack. Then you can upgrade its critical attack. So each Tem is kind of tailored or has its own specific area in which it's good at, and that's also kind of shown in the skill tree. And yeah, it's nice that you can kind of add these additional sort of skills to the game, or to improve your Tem if you've upgraded him enough, and if you have enough Pansons to pay for it. I also really like it because I think in Vampire Survivors it was like a flat stat upgrade for everyone if you leveled up, so you would just upgrade health or luck or whatever. I like it that in this game it's more individual to each Tem, so if you have a favourite Tem, you can just put all of your Pansons into it to get it upgraded as fast as possible. What I also like as well though is that the game, so I was putting a lot into Platypet, and the game basically told me when I got to, I think it's like 43,000 Pansons that I invested, it said, okay, if you can keep adding or you can keep leveling him up, but if you do, it might be make the game like make the early access a little bit easy for you, which I really like, because I was like, okay, cool, then I will start leveling up a different Tem. So it was kind of nice that the game didn't like let me ruin it for myself by just upgrading one and just keeping him upgraded and then making it too easy. It was nice that it kind of told me, okay, maybe you should leave him and level up some other ones, so it keeps the early access interesting for you, which I really liked. And yeah, I'm excited what the developers could do with this sort of leveling up mechanic, because it could be that, depending how much you spend and where you spend it, it could be that my Platypet, so my Tem, is really like kind of built different than someone else's, so that mine is maybe a lot faster and does a lot more because it's like a toxic Pokemon, does a lot more toxic damage because that's where I put my Pansons, where another person might have focused on more water damage and maybe made it more tanky. So I think that's really kind of interesting how maybe you could have the same character or the same Tem, but they are spec differently. And another big thing which this game adds, as well as kind of branching skill trees, is a mechanic called Kudos. And these are like mini challenges you can unlock whilst playing the game. So there are challenges for all Tems and general challenges that award you with Pansons for completing them. And this is basically kind of like a nice sort of checkbox challenge gamification level that is added to the game, where you as you were playing, you might just unlock something, and these challenges can be some really easy things where literally you will just get it for playing the games. Like it might be like level like a Tem up to this level, or unlock the final evolution of this Tem. It might be beat the first mini boss, beat the second mini boss, but then there are some sort of cool challenges that like aren't as straightforward. So some of them might be like you have to beat a battle or beat a stage without evolving a Tem at all. Or it might be that you need to use a Tem's ultimate move 15 times in a battle. So it just adds an extra layer of replayability to the game, I would say, because you feel like, okay, well, maybe this run I'm going to go for this specific Kudos because it gives me this many Pansons, and then I can use that to keep upgrading my Tem. And I like how natural and kind of organic it feels. When you finish a run, you see all of the unlocks that you get, and it just feels very satisfying. And I think in total already in the early access, there's like something like 830 of these different Kudos challenges to do. So already in the early access, there's a lot to do, but it doesn't feel grindy. Like it doesn't feel like I'm not progressing because I'm not doing these Kudos challenges. It just feels very natural. Like if you're enjoying the game, you are playing it because you enjoy it, and you're getting all of this cool stuff on top too, which is really, really nice. And what's even cooler is the Kudos can unlock gameplay mechanics too. So for example, in some skill trees, you cannot unlock a skill without beating a certain Kudos challenge first. So I like how the progression of your Tem is kind of linked to the Kudos and linked to the kind of passive gamification that you do. But at some points there are some things where you really have to be like, okay, I'm going into this run to unlock this specific thing because I want to be able to level up my Tem and get a certain move from the skill tree or a certain perk from the skill tree. And what's also cool is in the game, it sort of can also lead into different synergies. So if you unlock a certain skill in the skill tree, it might mean that you unlock a certain skill within the game that you can then use to create a synergy with an attack. And if you've played any other survivor-likes or roguelikes for that matter, you will know synergies are very, very important. And once you work out how to get them, synergies are the thing that propels your progression forward in these types of games. And wonderfully, in Temtem Swarm, synergies are really, really easy to understand. So what I mean by this is if you go into your first run and you get an attack that is like, I don't know, it's called Tackle, and it can level up to level 10. If you manage to level up Tackle to level 10 in that run, in the next run you'll have unlocked a synergy for that attack. So it's probably the synergies aren't very creatively named, but it's probably called something like Tackle Plus. So in the next run you go in and you can get Tackle again, level it up to level 10, but you need to find the correct skill that synergizes with that attack. So the skill might be called something like, I don't know, Power Up. So if you level up Tackle and you level up Power Up high enough, it will then give you the synergy Tackle Plus, which will do some kind of additional damage or have some additional like area range of area that does more damage. And synergies are really kind of the keys to being successful in these types of games. And what I really think is great about Temtem Swarm is like they kind of take the mystery out of the synergies and what they are, but in like a really good way. So if, for example, if you do your first run and you unlock Tackle Plus by leveling up Tackle to level 10, when you start your second run, it will show you on the skills that you have an option from every time you level up. This one synergizes with this move. So it's really easy to be like, okay, there's no real experimenting. It's like, all right, this is the move I need, or this is the skill I need to synergize with the attack I have. And I just have to keep leveling them both up to work out how, or to eventually unlock the synergy. And when I think about this is one thing I didn't really like about Vampire Survivors is because every time you wanted to create a synergy, you kind of had to think a lot about what item worked with what. And you could do that they had like a synergy recipe that just showed you like item A plus attack A or whatever it was, or item B equals synergy A or B. And they do have this in Temtem Swarm too, where you can look it up. But I really like you don't have to break up your kind of gameplay flow to check it. It's just as soon as you get a level up, you can see which attacks and skills you already have and which synergize together, and you can just choose them. I think it's like a really great quality of life feature that makes creating synergies less obtuse, which helped my decision making in runs, leading me to more wins that I probably would not have had otherwise in other survivor like games. And that actually brings us on to the runs themselves. So what actually happens on a run? Well, first you need to pick a Temtem you want to start your run off with. And in the early access build, as we said, there are 7 unlockable Tems. And at the time of writing, I've actually managed to unlock just 6 of them in the early access. And my go-to Temtem is Platypet, a blue cute as AF, or I don't want to swear, but AF platypus looking Tem. That is a water/toxic type. And I think the reason I chose him is sort of like because he's the first one you play with. I also think he's the best visually designed Tem in the game, in like Temtem as well. And he's also one that if you're into Pokemon, you might have remember around the release of Sword and Shield, there was like this leaked starter Pokemon that was this blue platypus. And that was actually this platypus from Temtem. So I don't know if like Temtem did that as like a marketing scheme to try and get eyes on their game, or if some developer or creator made that, and then Temtem bought the rights to use it. But basically, if you look up Platypet, he was this kind of spoof water starter for Pokemon Scarlet, not Scarlet. What was it? It was Sword and Shield. So that's why I also recognize him, because I even before I knew about Temtem, I was like, oh yeah, this is like the fake water starter. But even so, he has a really great design. He's very, very, very cute. And after that, after you've chosen your Tem, you can choose your map. And in the early access, there are 5 to unlock, but currently I've only managed to unlock 3. I think I could have gotten all 5 if I'd really focused on just leveling up one Temtem, but I really wanted to play with all of the different ones, so I kind of spread my Pansuns equally between all of the different Tems that I had. And to be honest, I just enjoyed just grinding through the other maps too, because I just enjoyed the game that much, so I wasn't really in a rush to get to the final map. But once you have chosen your map, your Tem starts off at a spawning location on said map, and then the fun begins. Enemies will start spawning in, and because your Tem always starts off with one attack, which auto attacks on a cooldown, you will start then attacking and slowly killing them, causing them to drop XP, which, as we've already talked about, causes you to level up. And that is more or less basically the loop of the game. The more XP you collect, the higher your level gets. The higher level you gets, the more attacks and stats you get, and the more attack and stats you get does more damage, means you kill more enemies, means you get more XP, and so on and so forth. However, there are some unique features to Temtem Swarm that set it apart from other games in the genre. For example, each Tem has its own unique ultimate move. So this is what I was talking about before, that you can press the space bar. So like everything in the game, the ultimate is on a cooldown, but when you use it, it does tons of damage. And ultimates, I like them because they can sort of be like get out of jail cards, where if you kind of feel that you are very overwhelmed, you can just press it, and usually there is some kind of area of impact. So for example, with Platypet, he sends out like a wave of water in like a circle around him and just kills everything in its way. So it's kind of like a good clearing method, that if you feel like you're about to get overwhelmed, you can press the space bar, clear out a load of enemies, get a load of XP, get a couple of levels, and then you're kind of stronger and can fight off the waves of enemies even better. And as you level up, you can add more attack or skills to your arsenal, or level up the attack and skills you already have. However, in Temtem Swarm, killing enemies is not the only way you can level up and improve your Tem. Throughout your run, missions will pop up on the map, or before I call them events, but yeah, missions I guess is what they're called. These are always linked to certain timestamps in your run. For example, the first 2 missions will always appear at 1 minute in your run and 3 minutes in your run. The missions are randomized events from a pretty small pool of events, I must say. These are, so one is basically destroy the nest is what I call it. These aren't the official names, these are just what I call them. But it's destroy the nest, where it's an event where you have to do damage to a nest/spawner within a certain amount of time. If you destroy the nest before the time runs out, you're rewarded with a healing item and a damage item, which is quite nice. There is an event called Pansun Fest, where for a certain amount of time, enemies killed within a certain radius of you are awarded drop Pansuns instead of XP. To be honest, this is my least favorite event, because I would rather have the XP because the XP means I can live longer in the actual run. There is a spawn event where higher level enemies will spawn, and if you defeat them, it awards you with high level XP. So this was actually my favorite because it would give you a lot of XP, especially if you get it on the 1 minute or 3 minute event. You get a lot of XP really quickly, which is nice. Then there is another one called Controlling the Zone, where a very small area appears on the map and you have to stand in the area and can't leave the area for a certain amount of time. And if you manage to stay in the area until the time runs out, you are rewarded with a chest, which is also nice because chests gives you a lot of good stuff. And I think that's all of them. It's kind of like the events happen quite often in the game, so I think it's like one every 2 to 3 minutes. I think it might, like for the early access, I think there's 5. 1, 2, 3, 4. Four events, at least for the ones that I have written down, and I don't think there's any others. So I think for early access 4 is fine, but I think it would be nice to have a few more added in future, because it does get quite repetitive. Like the more you play, you're just doing the same events again. And like I said, for me, the Pansunfest is definitely the worst, and also the Nest isn't that great. The rewards aren't that great. The best ones I think are the Control and the Spawn event. So if you kind of get into a seed where you have a lot of Pansunfest or a lot of destroying spawners or Nest back to back, it can be a bit annoying where you're like, I need the Spawn event because I need the XP right now because I'm losing. So yeah, I hope they add more events to the game as the early access progresses. And in addition to the events, there are also mini bosses and boss battles too. So these are also linked to time. I think the mini boss battles start at 5 minutes and 10 minutes, so there's always 2 per level, and the main boss spawns at 15 minutes. Therefore, if you get into the main boss battle consistently, runs last between 15 to 20 minutes, depending how quickly you can kill the boss. And I really like that the runs are a little bit shorter than Vampire Survivors, because in that one it's always 30 minutes. Because I think it makes them feel a little bit snappier, and it adds to this kind of more like one more run feeling that is vital for a game like this. So as soon as you kind of finish a run, you're like, I just want to do another one, which these games kind of live and die by. And yeah, each map has its own mini bosses and bosses. However, it is always the same for each 3 maps. So for map A, it's always the same 3. For map B, it's always the same 3. But yeah, like that's not such a big issue. Again, for the early access, it might be nice if they add more variety, or maybe mix them up, like randomize them more from the pool of like bosses they already have. But I think for early access, it's fine. And yeah, I do like the bosses themselves, like the main bosses. They're pretty fun and can be challenging if you've not leveled up your Tem properly. However, I did feel like if you weren't powered up enough, you had no way of beating the boss at the end of the level once it spawned. There were many times where I noticed that the boss's health bar was barely moving when I hit it. So it even meant I run around for another 15 minutes and just trying to grind out enough XP and avoid the boss and avoid taking damage for long enough that I could kind of match its level and then start doing proper damage to it. Or basically I just say, okay, I've not spec'd properly into this run, or maybe I picked the wrong Tem, because I think some Tems are better against some bosses than others, and you just kind of just accept that you're going to die and just go down in a wave of glory and just go straight for the boss and just hope for the best that you can do enough damage quickly to kill it. And I think, success with beating the bosses usually comes down to how many synergies you had. So obviously at the start of the game, it's hard to beat bosses because you don't have that many synergies unlocked. I think it would have felt a little bit better if XP dropped from enemies killed during the boss battle was higher, like of a higher quality, because it would have helped power me up at times where I was underpowered, and at least given me a chance of beating the boss. And for the times where I was already overpowered, I was killing the boss almost instantly anyway, so it didn't really matter if the XP around me was higher, because I was already killing the boss. But saying that though, it's kind of funny because I did manage to beat the first boss from the first map on my second ever run. So it's not impossible to beat them early on in the game if you know what you're doing. And it feels really, really satisfying to do so because you unlock so many like kudos challenges by doing that. So at the very start of the game, I was very, very rich in Pansuns because I unlocked so many challenges. But yeah, like I said, I think it didn't feel great where you were playing for 15 minutes and you got to the boss and you could just see, okay, I'm barely doing any damage. and there's not really a way other than, like I said, running around, avoiding the boss, trying to grind up enough levels to start actually doing damage, or just waiting for your ultimate to respawn or re-trigger, and just hoping that you can just do enough ultimates to kill it. So that didn't feel fun. It didn't feel like you had much of a chance to do that, to beat it if you're in that position. But yeah, so that's kind of like the main mechanics of the game. What I wanted to go on to next is the presentation of how it looks. But before we do that, I would like to remind you that if you're enjoying the podcast so far, please make sure you leave us a review and follow wherever you're listening. And I can't believe we've already been talking for half an hour about this game. I thought this was going to be a quick podcast, but obviously not. So let's get on to the presentation. And I think there is a little bit of a stigma around these Vampire Survivor games, in the sense that, especially looking at like Brotato and Vampire Survivors, where they feel very in kind of inverted commas, I should say. They feel very indie, and I think that is maybe a thing that puts some players off playing, where they're like, I don't want to play this because it doesn't look nice. So I think Temtem Swarm is actually the first kind of Survivors like what I look at, and I think it looks really, really nice. I think it's the best looking Survivor like game that we've had to date, and I think the Thames, we've seen them before in Temtem, but like I said, I think they have some really, really cool designs that obviously very kind of like how's the word? Like, I would say they're very appealing because they are kind of like Pokemon. They have a very similar style. They're very cartoony, cute, nice, bright colors, and that's also kind of repeated in the world. So the world itself, which you're playing in, has a really, really unique color palette, where it has like a lot of like pinks and turquoises and dark purples and kind of like light greens. Like, it's a very unusual color palette, but it just works really, really well in the game. And I think it's also kind of how the original game looked as well. And the maps look absolutely gorgeous. I would say the only thing I have feedback for on the visual side, and especially of the maps, is that sometimes it was very hard to tell what like environmental assets could be walked over and what couldn't. So there were some times where I would be running away from a wave of enemies, thinking I could walk over a rock, and then realizing that no, you can't pass over it, and then all of the enemies would swarm me and die. And that happened a couple of times. So even though I think the maps look gorgeous, I think they could reduce some of the busyness and the clutter. Because I think that's the bonus of these games looking very simple, is okay, I can walk there, but I can't walk there. Whereas if this one is a bit more like visually complex, then it means maybe the kind of the language of what you can and can't do in it, at least visually, is a little bit harder to tell. And I also think the game has a really, really nice soundtrack. It does get repetitive because each map has basically one track that loops over and over, and because you're playing each map for about 15 minutes, if you get to the boss, the loops can get a little bit repetitive, but again, the game's in early access, and the quality of the music that is there is really, really high. Like, it's very sort of has like these kind of Asian sort of like string instrument sounds, and then there's like a female voice that's sort of just like vocalizing on the track. Really, really high quality, really, really nice to listen to. But like I said, because there's only one track that just keeps looping and looping, and it doesn't really have any sort of variation to the track, it just loops and then loops again. It does get a bit boring to listen to after you've heard it 100 times already. So I hope that's something maybe they add too, is that maybe have like one or two tracks that kind of randomly loop throughout the entire game, throughout the entire battle. That would be nice. Nevertheless, I think if you've been put off this genre before, off the survival like genre, because of a lot of games in it don't look that like highly polished, or they're not in 3D. A lot of them are 2D, but this one it's like 3D, like isometric view. I think this might be the one that could get you in, because it looks really, really nice. It's very, very pretty. It runs really, really well. Like, I didn't see a single glitch or bug in the game, which is also like amazing for an early access game. It's just really high quality, and I think the presentation has been pulled off really, really nicely. Like I said, there's a few little things that I think they could improve during the early access, but otherwise it looks great. And another thing that this makes this game stand out, but isn't something I didn't really look into it, but the game has multiplayer, which is very, very cool. So you can actually team up with two friends to take on Temtem hordes, and you can do that online. And I think I'm not sure, but you can definitely do it online. I'm not sure if you can do it locally. It'd be a bit weird to do it locally, I guess, unless you did it with two controllers. But which for me is like a great appeal of this game. You know, Temtem also had like a big online component, so I guess Kremer have like experience working with online multiplayer. So I think it's nice that this is an option for this game. Yeah, for me, I only know one other person that has this game, and I know we are both busy, so I was just kind of playing it whenever I could, just to try to get my review out there. And I know he just kind of plays it too whenever he can, so we didn't really team up to try out the multiplayer. But hopefully, once the game comes out of early access, or if people start buying, people that I know start buying the game during the early access, it would be nice to try it out. And that does kind of bring us on to the main question then. Is Temtem Swarm worth trying out in early access? And I think if you're a Survivor-like fan, then yes, you should absolutely try it out. The point of entry is pretty low. The game only costs about €10 in early access. In addition, for an early access game, it already feels highly polished. I did not experience any bugs or glitches, so if that is usually a reason you do not try out early access games, it is not a problem here. Furthermore, the game looks and sounds fantastic, so if you are put off the genre because of some other games in it that don't look that graphically amazing, Temtem Swarm might be the game that will pull you in. For moving the genre forwards, I think Temtem Swarm is doing some interesting things. It is a great idea mixing the evolution mechanic with the leveling up mechanic of Survivor likes. I really like the quality of life features of telling you what skills and attacks synergize to work together as you level up. And I think the gamification of the kudos challenges makes the game even more enjoyable without making it feel grindy. I myself am looking forward to seeing what is added to the game during the early access. Looking at the Steam page for the game and the game itself, it looks like challenges are coming, which will be a great addition to the game. Plus, more Tems, moves, maps and bosses mean Temtem Swarm is a game I will be returning to often over the next year or so. So yeah, that was my review of Temtem Swarm. I'd be really interested to know what you guys think, especially if you are kind of Vampire Survivor-like or Survivor-like fans, or if you are Pokemon fans that maybe have never really heard of this genre but know Temtem, and maybe that would be like a good sort of way into the genre for you. As always, if you're a Spotify listener, you can let me know directly what you think of the game or the podcast down in the comments below. And if you're listening elsewhere, you can always hit me up on social media at Blue Sky if you just search for Beat Your Backlog Podcast, and also on Instagram at BYB_podcast. Or if you're a Discord person, you can join our Discord. The link to it will be in the description. And again, yeah, like I said, I already reviewed Vampire Survivors. The next Survivors game I have on my kind of docket on my backlog is a game called Karate Survivors, which is a 80s kind of TV martial arts show inspired Survivors game, which I think is awesome. But yeah, make sure you check out Vampire Survivors. My episode on that is episode 1, so it was the very first episode that I made of the podcast. That game was actually the game that inspired me to start the podcast, because I really wanted to talk about it, because I was like, oh my god, this game is amazing. So yeah, make sure you go back and listen to it, and hopefully since then, and what we are now, episode 48, so in the 47 episodes since then, hopefully the podcast have improved a little bit. Yeah, it'd be interesting to know what your thoughts are. And yeah, guys, as always, if you have enjoyed, please make sure you leave us a review, because reviews help new people find us. And make sure you follow or subscribe wherever you're listening. Thank you so much for listening. I hope you have a great day. Bye bye.